Today we will be discussing the Zenger case and why it was so important to the development of the freedom of the press. John Peter Zenger was a German immigrant that came to America as an apprentice newspaper printer. He came when he was only 13 years old, and by 1726 he established his own printing business. In 1731, a new governor was appointed due to the death of John Montgomery, who was the governor at the time. The person that stepped up next was senior counselor Rip Van Dam. He was able to successfully take the position until 9 months later the king appointed William Cosby, whom was the colonel of Minorca. Controversy arose when Cosby came into power, and his first order of business was demanding former Governor Rip Van Dam to hand over half of the salary he earned for the time he served as governor. Cosby filed suit in 1732 and won in a 2-1 Supreme Court vote. The one person that voted in favor of Van Dam was Chief Justice Lewis Morris. Shortly after the trial, he was removed from his position and replaced. The replacement made the opposition furious in seeing that the Cosby unreasonably removed someone from their position. This created the Popular Party, which stood against Cosby's administration. Members included Lewis Morris, James Alexander, William Smith, and Rip Van Dam. So what does John Peter Zenger have to do with all of this? At the time when all of this was going on, there were only a few newspaper printers around in New York, one of them being for Governor Cosby's position. In wanting to expose the corruptedness of the governor, the Popular Party created the New York Weekly Journal and chose Zenger as their printer. The Popular Party's head contributors of the Weekly Journal were left anonymous, and in 1734, John Peter Zenger was arrested and charged with printing seditious libel journals.
Papers slandering the crown. The jury still found Zenger not guilty after 10 minutes of deliberation. This case is one of the first cases that leads to more freedom in the press, freedom of speech, and other liberties that can be found in the Bill of Rights and Though the judge pleaded to the jury that Zenger committed treason when he published the
years in jail, and he would continue
Jack Peter Zenger was imprisoned for about a year while he awaited trial for libel and treason against the government, according to ushistory.org. While he awaited trial, his wife continued producing the paper in his absence. August 4th, 1735, marked the day the trial began in a New York Supreme Courtroom. Zenger's first two lawyers were disbarred by the court before they were able to represent him because the court was corrupt. The judge was appointed by the governor, William Cosby, so he could have more control. He was appointed a young lawyer by the government, which gave him little chance of winning the case. In an interesting turn of events, a lawyer from outside of New York represented him. Zenger ended up being represented by the most famous lawyer in the colonies, Andrew Hamilton, according to ushistory.org. Hamilton argued that Zenger just printed the papers, not wrote them himself. There was no proof that he wrote them. But the reason why Zenger came under fire was because the work was published anonymously, so the papers he printed bared his name. So the governor took action against him, because his name would show up on each of the papers that disrespected and exploited the government at the time. Hamilton also argued that the papers he printed were in fact true, and that how could someone be imprisoned for speaking the truth? He famously said, "Truth is a defense against libel," according to nps.gov. Though the judge pleaded to the jury that Zenger committed treason when he published the papers slandering the crown, the jury still found Zenger not guilty after 10 minutes of deliberation. This case is one of the first cases that leads to more freedom in the press, freedom of speech, and other liberties that can be found in the Bill of Rights and the Declaration of Independence.
After the not guilty verdict, Zenger was set free after spending most of the previous years in jail, and he would continue publishing the journal until his death at 40 years of age. According to the Constitutional Rights Foundation, the landmark case was a major victory that helped establish the building blocks for freedom of speech we know today. In a broad sense, the Zenger case proved that the colonists could successfully rebel against British law they considered unfair and unnatural. According to NewYorkCourts.gov, Zenger's acquittal would foreshadow events such as the Boston Tea Party of 1773 and the Revolutionary War itself. Most importantly, it demonstrated how important gaining a free press and a free speech was to the colonists. In addition to this, the case itself had little to almost no effect on what freedom printers could print at the time. It did not limit legislators to shut down printers either. The Zenger case is seen to be what started the American free speech movement. This case changed old beliefs of English law and revealed a new way of thinking towards speaking out towards governmental powers. According to NPS.org, the Zenger trial led to the way for the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America, which reads, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. On the other hand, the Zenger jury verdict did not establish a court precedent, since only the rulings of judges were able to do that. But accounts for the trial were widely published in the colonies and England. On both sides of the Atlantic, the trial sparked debates about the meaning of freedom of the press. After the trial, royal officials in the colonies brought few seditious liberal prosecutions. They were afraid that juries would refuse to convict. Colonial assemblies, however, continued with prosecutions. In conclusion, after the American Revolution and the writing of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights was adopted. Like mentioned earlier, the First Amendment to the Constitution guaranteed that Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. Like many people would agree today, we could thank the Zenger case for its wonderful verdict that allowed this freedom of speech to take place in our country today. Thank you.